Some people say I'm a storyteller, and I do tell stories. I try my best to make the Bible become real to you as it is to me. There are characters in the Bible as real people that live in real times. The writers of the Bible as real people that were really inspired of God. And I have lived a long life. Some people would say a very exciting life. It could have been a lot less exciting. I would have, at times, would have wished that I had a lot more quiet in my life. For the last 22 years, I've been married to a beautiful, wonderful woman, Marilyn, that has stood by my side. The ideal situation in life is to marry your childhood sweetheart or love, to stay with them all your life. When you do get old, you're just about all each other's going to have. You're going to be your best companions and friends and loves. The Bible is a marvelous book. It's inspired. It is God-breathed. And so many times people put down the creation. God's creation, His handiwork. Man created, or God created man in His image. But He created all animals triune. They have bodies, they have souls, and they have spirits. Animals remember, they learn, they reason, and God made them that way. The book of Genesis tells us that God created all animals, not for food, but for companionship of Adam. And when there was not found a complete companion in every way corresponding to Adam, God took from Adam, He hypnotized Adam, put him into a deep hypnotic trance, and took from his sides and his bones and his fleshes and his bloods, it says in Hebrew, and created him Isha, or woman. That didn't play didn't play the animal kingdom down. The first way that God revealed Himself to man is through His creation. The creation of God glorifies God. It shouts out praises to Him and who He is and what He is. God, secondarily, instills in every man the knowledge of God and that there is a God. Number 3, by specific revelation, God has revealed Himself to mankind. And 4, now specific revelation, it was through prophets, and then finally through the Bible, that we have the complete will of God. Now, when we play down animals as dumb, brute beasts, with no mind, no thoughts, no reason, we play down something that God created. We know that swine are very smart pigs. Whales and dolphins. They talk, they communicate, they do all kinds of things in every way. Now, originally, before the flood, man was not supposed to kill an animal at all. If you shed an animal's blood, you will die for it. Killing an animal was a death sentence. It was a capital crime. After the flood, God gave us animals to eat. Now, you say, well, that old geezer is kind of a wacko, modern type wacko, tree hugger, and an animal lover. Well, I believe in the creation of God. And I believe that everything that God made is very important to you and to me. I want to tell you a story about two individuals. Two wonderful lives lived well. Two wonderful lives lived well. One of them was William.He. He was born in 1833 and he died in 1909. And he lived well. He lived a good life. And I want to talk about a horse. A horse. The most educated horse that have been known and recorded in history. I can't call him the smartest horse because I think that all horses have that intellect. I did a story here a while back on my daughter's big sister, and we talked about Peanut, the little white horse that my daughter had that was almost human in brilliance and in love between species. You'll have to listen to that story also, my daughter's big sister. But William.He was a slave. He was born a slave in the South. And I'm going to show you some pictures here right now. These are real people and a real horse. There is Jim.He. He's a horse. There's another picture of Jim.He. Here they put a silver dollar at the bottom of a glass bucket, so to speak, and he would reach down and get that silver dollar out without drinking any water. Here's another picture of him taking change out of a cash register and giving correct change. Here's another picture of him here also. And there is a picture of the former slave, William.He, and the horse that he loved so much. This is a true story. To begin with, we have to understand something about William.He. A little black boy that was born a slave in the South. Now, I wish Michelle Obama would listen to this story. First of all, there were many slaves in the South that loved their masters. There were many slaves in the South that did not love their masters, and masters did not love them. We have a president, Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson had slaves. General George Washington and President George Washington had slaves. Thomas Jefferson had slaves his father-in-law gave to him, but the slaves that his father-in-law gave to him were half-sister and half-brothers to his wife. Sally Hemings was with him longer than his wife was, his white wife, and she was a half-sister to his wife. And she was very white, probably only not over 1/4 black. And she had several children by him, and they were all set free at his death, and some of them set free in his life. He loved Sally Hemings, and he had children by her. He was called all kinds of things when he was president, because he lived, this black girl was his wife. Now, there were more Indian slaves in America than there ever were black slaves. And the Indian slaves were treated very bitterly and terribly. We had a civil war that finally, in finality, ended up being over slavery. It didn't start that way. And it ended in 1865. Now, I want to tell you a little story. In 1869, they were still selling Indian slaves at market on the auction block in Los Angeles, California in 1869. There were Indian slaves in California and Nevada and Utah all the way back up into the 1900s. You read the story of Ishi, the last wild Indian in California. People hunted Indians as big game. A lot of things have been done in the history of America that were not lived by good men and good lives. A lot of things to be ashamed of and a lot of things to be proud of. We just had a president for 4 years that fought the deep state, the FBI, the CIA, and everything else. And a military complex. One man that stood for American rights. He's lived a good life. All he wants from you is to say that he did a good job. He didn't need the job. He gave his life to you for 4 years. That's a life well spent. Now let's get back to William Key, the little black slave boy. William Key was born in Winchester, Tennessee in 1833. And he was named after his owner and master, John W. Key, a well-known planter in Shelbyville, Tennessee. In his early years, he had great fondness for animals, always kind to them, and many a poor dog and a worried cat was he the defender of in all the old plantation. They tell a story when Bill Key, as he was called when he was young, he was 6 years old. He had a rooster and a yellow dog. A lot of this story reminds me of me, by the way. And he would do wonderful things. They would do wonderful tricks with him. Out on the farm, people would come to see Wilbur and Peanut and Ducky and all of my animals. I had birds trained, fish trained, and everything out there on the farm, and it was like a circus. Well, here we go 100 years ago, almost 200 years ago, and he had a rooster and a yellow dog that would do wonderful tricks. His entry into the barnyard was the signal for a genuine general commotion. That remind you of something, Marilyn? For all the animals, big and small, seemed to recognize him as their friend and their love. If a colt was to be broken, Bill was sent for by the neighbors for miles around, and he did it by kindness. He broke colts. He would take a wild, frightened colt up to his master's farm, and in a week's time, by his gentle and patient care, he would return him to the owner, ready to drive and ride. So remarkable was his success with balking and kicking mules, in which he took a special pride, that the whole colored population, the black people, used to say he bewitched them. Uncle Bill is a mulatto and a veterinary surgeon. A mulatto means that he was part white. Born a slave, he was one of those fortunate men who had a kind master. And when war clouds began to hover over the Southland and his master's sons left home to defend their cause, Uncle Bill went with them to look after his young master's sons. They just went with General Palmer's, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Their company was called Festivale Guards under Captain Webb. Asked why he went into the army instead of seeking his freedom, he said, "I loved my young masters. I was afraid they would get killed or hurt, and not having anything to eat, so I went with them to make sure that I took care of them." And they did keep, and he said, and I did keep them from being killed. One reporter asked him, he said, "Yes, sir, I did." was he at Fort Donelson, Tennessee, when the Yankees captured us. I stole them out of prison and took them into the rebel lines. It was at Fort Donelson that he built his famous fort called Fort Bill. This man was brilliant. This black slave was brilliant. And he had a heart as big as the world. He said he dug out this small place in the ground, and he covered it with logs to keep the bullets out, where he would seek cover. And when they began to shoot, he would try to coax his young masters to go in there to be saved. When Fort Donelson surrendered, and in the night, Bill stole out and formed a place unguarded and took his young masters out and found a place unguarded. And he took with them important papers, and they escaped. They then joined General Forrest, acting as scouts and guides. After the Stone River battle, Bill undertook to get another darky, that means black man. This is written in the times when they call these people other than things we call today. Through the lines and caught by the guard, the 6th Indiana Regiment, and quickly thrust him in prison as a spy. He said, I told the Yanks I was tired of the rebels and wanted to be free. But they called in some men, some Union men, that lived near my home. And they told the officers that I was the worst rebel in the South. And told them that they ought to hang me with my young master when they caught him. Ought to hang us together. He said, I stayed in that prison for 6 weeks. When one day, General Nagley stated he wanted a cook. And someone who knew me told him that I was the best cook in the country. So he and Captain Prather both came and wanted me. I liked the looks of Captain Prather, and I knew he was a great poker player. And I had never found a man that could beat me in playing poker. So I went with Captain Prather, and in 6 weeks I owned everything that he had. He owed me over $1,000 in cash. He gave me a pass to go home for the debt. He had a pass to go home for the debt that he owed him. He owned everything he had. At the Battle of Shiloh, I was with my young master again, and I tried to shoot him in the calf of his leg so that he would have to go home and not fight anymore. I loved him, and I didn't want him to be hurt. I kept close watch on him. The second time the Yanks caught me, I went into their lines to get $500,000 in Confederate money. A man who knew me offered me $100,000 in Confederate money if I would go to a certain store which a Union man kept and bring me back the money that was hid there. I did the job like this. But there was so much money that one night I stole out by the camp, and when I got into the town, the first man I met was the worst enemy. My worst enemy. He was a slave driver and had tried to buy me. And I persuaded my master not to sell me, and he swore that he would get me someday, somehow, and lick the blood out of me. Beat the blood out of me is what he meant. Well, he clapped me in prison, told me he will have me hung before daylight. And he would, but the lawyer, W.H. Wiseman, who knew me, and that I had money, said if I would give him $1,000, he would get me off. I had the money and my chute. Sewed between the soles. My case was put off and time again by this lawyer, and the next day, and one day, the inspector said he wanted a good whitewasher. I told him that was my regular business, and that my brushes were at a certain store in town. He sent me there with a guard. I went behind the counter and pulled off the sole of my shoe and gave the money to the lady who run the store, and she gave it to Lawyer Wiseman. The next day, the rebels raided and captured the place, and I was let go, and my money was gone too. I went into the medicine business, he said. He was a veterinarian and a doctor and a surgeon. Now this man was raised like one of his own, that his master raised him like one of his own sons. He educated him just like he did his own children. And that man loved his master and his master's children with a love that went beyond the call of duty. I had a liniment I called the Keystone liniment. And everybody wanted it, so that started me into the medicine business. I used to travel around the country with a minstrel band to attract a crowd and then sell my medicine. He was a traveling medicine man. One day a man told me that a circus was going to sell out, and I bought some of the horses. Loretta, the Arabian mare, the mother of Jim, was one of them. Now we have to go back in time now, because we come to the horse of the story. Now this story goes on, probably it goes back to Persia. Now there was a Persian sheik called Ahmad. He was a powerful ruler in Arabia. He was envied and admired by all who he ruled in love and firmness over all of his tribe. He had the greatest Arabians in all of Arabia. There was not a tented home in all of Arabia that had such fine Arabian horses that went all the way back to the time of Pharaoh. Now, Arabian horses from Arabia are different than the ones you see here. Down here, just about 5 miles that way, I worked for E.L. Cord, Eric Loban Cord, the builder of the Duesenberg, the Auburn, and the Cord automobiles. He went to the sands of Arabia and bought 2 Arabians, a stallion and a mare. And those Arabians were unlike any other Arabians I ever saw. They were as calm as a puppy dog. And yet they could outrun anything, and they were smart as whips. The Arabians raised their horses in tents with them. They're house animals, like the Indians of America were. This Sheikh Ahmed had an Arabian mare, a gray Arabian mare that was queen of all the Arabian horses, the fair Loretta, with a lineage carefully kept on tablets of ivory, going all the way back to the broods of Pharaoh of Egypt. Now you have to realize that the Arabians are cousins to the Egyptians. Hagar was Pharaoh's daughter. Abraham took Hagar as what we might call a political marriage. He betrayed Pharaoh in many ways, of course, we know. But he had a child from Hagar, and Hagar means wanderer. And of this child, is Ishmael. And Ishmael means that God hears. Hagar was the first person in the Bible to call Jehovah her shepherd. The living one watches over me, she said. And he did. And of course, 12 princes came out of Ishmael, and then we have Abraham having Isaac, and then 6 other sons by Keturah. He had 8 children altogether. But the son of the lineage was Isaac, Yitzchak. And of course, Isaac had Jacob and Esau, and he favored Esau, which became also intermarried into the Arabian people. And so we have the Egyptians and the Arabian people closely related. Now these are the people that had these Arabian horses. This is the rest of the story. His comrade and friends and all the 10 tribes had a long association, love and kindness, and they were brought up to their own plane when their animal instincts had aided wits and reasoning sense. They feel and know all the ambition and love and hate of their human masters. And every black tent down in Arqaba and to the ocean and across the Euphrates and beyond the sea of the Scythians and the renown of Arletta, the worshipped of all was the daily talk of all of the people in the tents of Arabia. She was renowned, the queen of all Arabia. Every one of all these tribes prayed for the safety of Loretta every day because they said that she was the keeper of the greatest of all the horses. In her loins, in her womb, would be the greatest of all the horses. The sheik had been entertaining a trusted stranger. And the stranger had stolen the mother queen of horses, Loretta. On one full moon night he passed, yet in the middle of the night, and he went from his tent and went to the tent where Loretta was kept with 3 other horses, great horses, what we call the majesty, the whole majesty, the kings of Arabia, the queen and the kings of Arabia. He went to that tent and there were 2 guards out in front. He took his sharp knife and went to that tent and cut it as high as he could, and he went in and he saw Loretta standing by the other 2 Arabian horses. And he carefully and quietly took her bridle and muzzled her nose and got her out and away from there, and he led her in the sands, and finally he got on her back. And he said she literally flew like Pegasus across the desert. No one could catch her. They mourned for her. They accused the sheik of selling her for a large price. And he cried. And he cried. No horse could catch her. She ended up in a circus in England. She was a sensation in Europe, in the circus. What a tremendous sensation a horse can make, said one gray-haired diplomat in the parliament. Here is the gray Arabian mare that is drawing such crowds at the circus because she is known as the queen of all Arabia. Horses causing us no end of annoyances by the fanatics of Arabia because they say she was stolen. And others say that the Sheikh Ahmed sold her and his numerous followers have deserted him. And all because of the one gray Arabian mare. And Loretta, the once proud queen of the desert, now the slave of a circus owner. Though the greatest in the land, to be exhibited by tens of thousands of people who are curious to see her fame and her greatness. Through careless and unkind treatment, she broke down and was taken to America and sold again to a smaller circus. Then after a short while, became stranded in the South in Tupelo, Mississippi. To get rid of her, the owner sold her at auction with some of the other horses. A colored man, well known as a veterinarian in Shelbyville, Tennessee, Dr. William Key, bought her for a large sum of $40 at that time. This is in the 1880s now. It's said that she was sold one time for $50,000. Loretta fell into a kind and able hands of Dr. Key, was celebrated throughout all the South as one of the greatest veterinarians with his marvelous skill and knowledge of animals. Though it took nearly a year, with careful attention, the doctor cured her. The doctor thought that Loretta, and he knew her story, if bred to a fine Hambletonian stallion, that they would bring forth the greatest of all horses and start a new breed. She was finally bred. His mother was Loretta, a full-blood Arabian. His father was a Hambletonian. The Tennessee Volunteer was his name. These are real people and real animals. Now, Dr. Key said that Loretta was the most brilliant, smartest horse that he ever saw in his life until that point. He said she was like a human. You could talk to her. She could seem like talk back to you. She could read your thoughts, and you seemed to be able to understand what she wanted and needed. He bred her to this unbeatable stallion, Tennessee Volunteer. For nearly a year after Jim was foaled, now this is his own words, I had no hope of him. Knowing that he was the finest bred horse in the whole country, I was very anxious to see what he would turn out to be. For Loretta, his dam, was the smartest horse I'd ever seen, and his sire, Tennessee Volunteer, well, he couldn't be beat. But Jim pretty near done broke my heart, he said. For he was the most spingled, shank-legged animal I ever did see. There was an old, no-account, bow-legged, the word he uses is the word black people don't want to hear, named Jim that lived near me. And I named Jim after him, though I had some very fine Bible names picked out before. Now you know that these old black people, many of them were missionary Baptist. And they read the Bible and they preached, and many of the slave plantations had a Baptist church in it with the black people. Now this old black man loved the Bible and loved God, and he loved God's creation. He said, I had a lot of Bible names picked out, but I took a mighty fine care of Jim, and before long his legs began to straighten out. He was a knowing colt. I know that he understood well. He said, I tell you, he just lived in my house and he would follow me around like a puppy dog. He wanted to know everything around. He wanted me to tell him about it. Remind you of that duck I had, Marilyn?
Yeah.
Duck wanted to read papers and look in books. He loved to watch pictures, look at pictures. This horse must have been like that. He wanted to know what everything was, and I commenced to teach him simple things. He's the most educated horse in the world that we know about. I'm not saying that any other horse couldn't be taught like this if you had patience and love that has the intelligence. No two human people have the same intellect. Some are brilliant and some are dumber than a box of rocks. I want to say this for just a moment. Very seldom in the animal kingdom do we see mothers turn on their young ones and kill them. Very seldom. Very seldom do we do this, but we see mothers and drug addicts and in ghettos all over America, and even in big cities that care nothing for their children. They use them as merchandise. He said he just lived in my house and followed me around like a dog. He wanted to know what everything was, and I taught to begin to teach him. One of the first things he learned, and I didn't teach it to him, was to unfasten the gate and let himself out into the road. Does that remind you of Wilbur, Maryland?
Yes.
She wanted to be up at the house with us. Followed me all. Turn on every faucet in the yard. That was a pig, Wilbur. She knew what left and right was. She could unscrew anything. I used to try to teach people mechanics. I couldn't teach them what their left hand thread and right hand thread was. I began to teach him when he was a year old. I first taught him to lay down and roll over and to give symptoms of bots and colic, and because I was then in the medicine business. Next, he learned to make believe that he was lame and act as though he was suffering with different kinds of troubles. And he would reproduce all these symptoms. I had him learn to bring me different things and then to learn different colors. The hardest thing I had to teach him was to learn to eat sugar, because Dr.He rewarded animals with treats. He wanted to give him a little sugar cube if he did something right. But Jim didn't like sugar. He couldn't stand it. He said I had to teach him to eat sugar. He said finally, he just turned his nose up, he wouldn't have anything to do with it. Now, if he knew what we knew today, sugar is not really good for you too much. Sugar is empty food, but it was a treat. It was how he trained other horses. He took a sugar cube and put it in an apple. And finally lowered the piece out. He loved apple, but he finally just put an apple skin on the sugar cube and he ate it, and he got to where he really liked it. He finally reduced the apple down just to nothing but a skin over the sugar cube. And he began to like sugar. He said the learning of the alphabet was the work that required the most patience. He's going to teach him his ABCs. Now, they used to teach kids how to sing the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they had to sing a little song with it. Well, now he's going to teach this horse his ABCs, because he thinks the horse can do it. He said, learning of the alphabet was the work that required the most patience. I had to keep it up for years. When I began, I had in my mind only to teach Jim the letter A. A. I got some cards with the letter A on it and put sugar on the card. This was, of course, after Jim had grown to have a love for sugar, which he has never lost to this day, he said. I would say him A, A, A. Now, he'd have all kinds of cards over there, but the card that had sugar on it was A. He would go over there and he'd smell around, he'd look, and finally he knew what an A looked like. He said I had to keep him away from the other horses. He said Jim thought he was a human. He slept with me. He slept with him. William Key slept in the barn with that horse. his wife was real jealous of the horse. Finally, his wife went out one day, and she had an apple in her hand. And she said, "Jim, do you want an apple?" And he starts going like this. And she hollers to William Key. She said, honey, he said yes. Well, William Key couldn't get her to do it, or couldn't get him to do it. Finally, he got him to do it later on. But the first person, and Jim learned that on his own. He said yes. He watched his master say yes at times, so he said yes. Mm-hmm. The horse is reading people's minds. He's a lot smarter than they think he is. He said, "I finally got a piece of tin and painted the letter A on it. It took months and months up to a half a year before I was satisfied that he would know the letter A when he would see it. When I had this done, I thought that if Jim could bring the card to me." So he taught him how to bring the card to him. Finally, I would have a piece of apple in my hand and hold it out in a handkerchief to him. Then it would give him the apple. Then he'd carry the apple and carry the handkerchief. He learned that he was being rewarded, and I soon had him tugging at the card and bringing the card to me. Then I thought I had my fortune made, he said. "I'm going to show this horse how smart he is in the world." Then he said, "I happen to think if he knows how to see and look and know what an A is, maybe he'll learn B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z." Well, after he learned the alphabet, the horse really knew what the letters were. He really knew what A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z was. And he learned how to spell names. Said, "Jim, we'd take him to places." And here's a picture of him right here. He'd say, "Jim, tell these people what your name is. Go get the letters and spell out your name." And if you look on there, it says Jim Key right in front of him. And then he taught him how to do arithmetic figuring. Reading, writing, arithmetic, remember? Now he's learned reading and he's learned writing. Now he's going to learn arithmetic. And he learned how to take a letter and put it in the post box under that number or that name. He said, after I got the alphabet down, he said the rest of it went like, he was flying with his mind. His mind was great. We were communicating with letters and numbers. From the time on, my work was comparatively easy. I taught him to count, then to figure. It took years, but I kept at it day after day until now he knows up to 30. He can count, divide, multiply up to 30. Jim likes writing and quickly learns names printed on cardboard. I believe he knows every word that I say to him. Sometimes it seems that in every way that he understands what I'm thinking. And I understand what he's thinking. Some people call it hypnotism and bewitching an animal. I said, I just say that Jim knows and does what I ask him to do. He knows that he does what I ask him to do. It was just kindness, mere kindness, and nothing more. Now I'm spending all of my time teaching him in the places and the quotations where the horse is mentioned in the Bible. He's reading the Bible to the horse, telling him about God. I remember one story of Helen Keller. Well, they finally got her where she communicated. She was blind, deaf, and dumb, couldn't do anything, and they finally taught her sign language. And they began to communicate with her, and they began to tell her about God. She thought, I've known him all the time. I've known him all the time. I knew he was. Remember the second point of systematic theology? By his creation we know him. Number 2, by intuition inside we know him. Number 3, by specific revelation through the prophets, etc. And final revelation through the Bible. He said, I taught him the places and quotations where the horse is mentioned in the Bible. For horses were mighty prominent animals in the Bible. And the prophets had visions of them, and John said he looked up and he beheld a white horse in heaven. And what Jim wants to know is, now Jim, he understands what his master is reading to him. And Jim wants to know, if there are any white horses in heaven, why can't a good bay horse go there also? Because he was a bay horse. Jim Key the horse. He said, I taught him how to read and write, and I began to take him out in community. And he said, one thing I taught them is kindness to animals. Kindness to animals. He said, you can get an animal to do more than you can by cruelty, but by kindness and understanding. He said, Jim Key always travels in a palace car. Always he just likes jarring, travels, and refuses to lie down when he's on the road in a railroad train car. A Pullman car. Because of the bumping and his stops and starts of the train would jar him rudely. When he makes a long journey, he is granted a stopover and a halfway point in order that he may enjoy the comforts of a box stall and obtain a good night's rest before he's going to perform. When at home or stabling in some city where is an expedition, Jim Key has his faithful old valet for his stallmate. The doctor places his cot in the stall with his pet, and the two sleep together 365 nights of the year. During the working hours, Jim is never unattended. Either the doctor who trained him or a groom is constantly by his side, and he could not be given more constant care and attention where he, the fleetest racer, the fastest racehorse in the world, on the eve of the most important derby of the turf. Even his grain and hay, though the choicest quality that can be bought, is examined very closely to see that no impurities are in it. His drinking water is not from a common hydrant, but the purest spring water that can be procured. Often bottled water is secured for him. He drinks only water from which all the impurities have been filtered. Every morning he has a gallop and comes in reeking with perspiration to receive an hour's rubbing and combing until his coat fairly shines, and then in fine condition for the next daily work. Jim is a splendid saddle horse and has led many big parades. His beautiful arched neck and the graceful curves of his body and long sweeping tail make a beautiful picture. As he keeps in step with the music, he likes to dance. Though prancing and fairly dancing, at the New Orleans Horse Show and many others where he has been on expedition, he has taken all the blue ribbons in all the several cities. Jim likes applause. That's his most human trait, Dr. Key says. In breeding, he is Hambletonian, as elsewhere related. His height is 16 hands tall. He is Mahogany Bay. At this time, he's 11 years of age, and that's June 1901. Never has he been sick, always takes special delight in his work, seems eager to learn, and no actor was ever prouder of making a great hit than Jim was, playing to a crowd, to a large house. And when the crowd shows their appreciation by clapping and applause, he just smiles in his eyes. He said that's his most human trait. When he has a small audience, he said sometimes he doesn't think people appreciate him. Jim understands what one is saying. When he is praised, his head goes up high and saying, "What horse is smart as I?" He was first exhibited while at the Nashville Exposition, and Mr. A.R. Rogers, a businessman of New York, saw first time this marvelous, intelligent animal. Being greatly interested in humane societies and a great lover of horses in particular, he purchased from Dr. Key for $10,000 this beautiful animal. But Dr. Key put in the contract a clause to this effect: "I am always to be with Jim Key as groom and teacher." For he would not part with his pet, nor his pet part with him. So north he went, and Dr. Key and Mr. Rogers, beautiful country home in the oranges of suburb of New York. And here for a year, Jim was given his finishing touches before he was ever put on public expedition. Since that time, many offers have been made to buy Jim. One party offered $60,000 for him, and you have to remember, this is 1901. But Jim Key is not for sale at any price, for not only does he earn more money than any other horses, but he's a missionary and a teacher of the human race. He teaches the public to be kind to animals. Last year at his performances, over 185,000 boys and girls promised to always be kind to animals. And thousands of adults, after seeing his remarkable performance, have gone away with some resolve in their hearts. Jim has been exhibited in Boston, Cincinnati, Nashville, Atlanta, Birmingham, Chattanooga, New Orleans, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Atlantic City, Trenton, and Reading, besides many of the big state fairs, and his success has been phenomenal. The following few examples illustrate his earning powers, for a singular attraction has ever been taken in half the money that Jim Key has, and no uncommon sight to see hundreds waiting to get into a place of exhibition as if he was some famous actor or president or king or queen. 3 performances in Sam Jones Tabernacle, Nashville, Tennessee, at attendance 17,610 people. 3 weeks in New Orleans expedition, receipts $5,211.50. 1 week in Music Street Fair, receipts $1,847. 10 weeks review in Park, Baltimore, the greatest drawing card and moneymaker ever had. Our casino packed 5 times a day, the longest run of an attraction ever in Baltimore, in that city, says James I. Kernan, the manager. 7 weeks in export expedition in Philadelphia, receipts $20,612. According to the records in the department there were 173,200 tickets of admission sold to visitors of the educated horse. Beautiful Jim Key, resulting in the sum of $20,612.90. This attraction proved to be the best patronized of numerous shows in the Midway. 6 week at Pittsburgh expedition, receipts $7,000. 2 years previous he was there at free attraction. 3 weeks of the next year, the receipts were $5,000. 4 weeks in Boston Food Fair, the greatest drawing card and charging an extra admission, his receipts were $5,000. John L. Young, or John I. Young, said, "I've never seen such a drawing card on my pier before or during any large attendance at Easter time." over 80% of the thousands who thronged my pier paid extra admissions to see Jim Key. Jim Key's phenomenal record at the Young Ocean Pier, Atlantic City, opened in their theater March the 17th and staying until September the 1st, playing daily except Sunday to thousands of delighted, astonished people, many coming and going to see him in a record unequaled by any other show ever. William Key stayed with that horse for years. He finally retired. They went, and Jim Key lived with them in their little house. William Key slept with that horse. They were close as your twin sister and you. William Key died in 1909, October the 18th, 1909. Jim Key lived on to 1912. He was 23 years old. William Key was 76 years old. They were both buried in Shelbyville, Tennessee. And on the great tombstone there, it tells about William Key and Jim Key and his wife. They're all buried there. And it says, "Be kind to animals," because they're God's creation. I hope you enjoyed this story. It is a beautiful story of two beautiful lives. I heard this story many years ago. There were other horses that people tried to train, and some of them with great success. But Jim Key was an exceptional, because he was trained by an exceptional man. This is the piece of history and a piece of God's love. How many animals have affected your life? Or are you so hard and cold and stone-hearted that you just look on them as worms, cockroaches? Have you ever had a cat that loved you? By the way, people that don't like cats are not as smart as cats are, because cats pick out who they like, and that's it. If a cat doesn't like you, you're not going to be his master. A dog will give his life for you, and if you beat him and stomp him and starve him, he'll still love you. Animals are a special creation of God. Every animal can teach us something. Jim Key, that horse, that Arabian Hambletonian cross, that was born in 1889, died in 1912, took a message to the world that shows how intelligent animals are. Dolphins, porpoises, these all, they say, are able to almost talk and communicate. I've had some bad horses and good horses. One of the greatest horses I ever had was Rocket. Red Rocket was his name. I rode these hills up here on that horse's back. That horse is a wonderful horse. I was the first one to ever ride him. I had a horse named Handy Star King that almost killed me. He was vicious. I had another one named Red Ears. That was quite a character. One of the best horses that ever rode. Powerful horse. Appaloosa, almost pure white with red ears inside. And then I met a little horse called Peanut that became my daughter's big sister and loved her like no sister ever could have. I was with her when she drew her last breath, her looking at me thinking that I could fix her. Animals are special creation of God. God gave them to us as companions. It hurts me when I see animals mistreated. And you know, I've been a hunter all my life. I was a tribal hunter in Fish Lake Valley with the Western Shoshone. I killed over 300 deer. I never conquered a deer. They gave themselves to me. I never wanted to hurt a deer. I killed them with a very powerful caliber where they wouldn't hurt. I didn't want to see one all crippling off. I wouldn't shoot a deer with a small caliber rifle. They give themselves to us. Every time you eat a hamburger, something died for you. Think about it. Something died for you. Like Jesus died for you and gave his life for you that you might have eternal life. I pray like an Indian, they say. I thank God for the animals that gave their lives for us and from the fruit from his earth, because it's all his. Our Father, we send this little story out to touch hearts. Father, we know you gave your Son to us. And we know that when he was out in the wilderness, that the animals came to him like his companions. So many times in this world, all we have are animals to be our companions, to be our loves. I'll never forget when Marilyn, when she was so beaten by her mother and her father abused her and not protecting her, that the only friend she had in the house, her mother wouldn't let anybody talk to her, was that dog that licked her hand. Father, thank you for the animals you've given me in my life, and Ducky and Wilbur and Peanut and Star and Peep and Blackie and Missy. All of these special animals, little Peep. Thank you for those that have meant so much to me and taught me how to love and taught me how beautiful your creation is and how great it is. Father, please forgive me where I fail you, and use this story to honor and glorify you and your creation. In Jesus' name I pray.